It's the economy, stupid. That is the famous phrase symbolizing how presidential elections can largely be either won or lost. Tonight, there are two very different approaches. Why Donald Trump is now embracing crypto. And did you hear the new claim from President Biden? Plus, your airline miles. Why top officials here in Washington, we're talking about them today. The Points Guy joins us live here on the Hill in just a bit. And thought you knew what might be happening down at the southern border? One of the lead senators on the Homeland Security Committee joins us ahead of tonight's NewsNation Border Special. Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. All right, here we are, here we go. Hanging out with us today, Scott Bolden, former D.C. Democratic Party chairman, NewsNation contributor as well. Lauren Wright, Princeton University political scientist. Chris Hahn is a former senior aide to Senator Chuck Schumer, NewsNation contributor. And Denise Gitsom, former George W. Bush aide, NewsNation contributor as well. Hello to you all. Nice to have you in. Happy Thursday. Yeah, it's Thursday. It is Thursday, right? Yeah. Okay, I was just making sure.
You made it.
You're Friday. All right, made me think there for a second. A huge show here coming up. Congressman Adam Smith, House Armed Services Committee, going to be joining us momentarily. Senator Roger Marshall on the Homeland Security Committee going to be here as well. The Points Guy. Why Washington was talking about your airline miles and your points. We're going to get to him in a second. But first, I want to start with this video. You all remember it from March 21st. Let's show it. This was down on the southern border, in which Texas National Guard troops, that was the scene. You've probably seen it. Southern border, migrants trying to get across. You can see how these troops are rushed. They're pushed back. The migrants are able to make their way over. Now fast forward to here we are in early May. Let's keep this video up. 214 cases we have just learned within the last few hours from this episode have now been dropped. The El Paso County judge determined that he had no jurisdiction over this, so all minor misdemeanor charges dropped against what happened against the Texas National Guard. If I was to walk out of this studio and do that to a law enforcement officer, I would be arrested, I would be processed, I would have that on my record forever. And it just goes to show, A, the situation down there at the border, Denise, and B, how very little of this can be processed.
Yeah, I mean, listen, last time we played this, Scott and I were on the panel together, and both of us agreed for once. And we said, if this is the only ad that Republicans run this fall, it'll sweep the entire nation. All this represents to Americans that are watching at home is everything Trump's saying about Biden now, which is chaos, broken borders, and complete lawlessness.
I'll let Chris respond to that. I want to get your legal take here.
I don't agree that immigration is ever a decisive issue in an election federally. But I will also say there were bills on the floor that would have added troops at the border.
We're going to talk to Roger Marshall about this.
These are Texas National Guardmen who should not be at the border. Exactly. We should have Border Patrol people at the border. And President Biden, along with conservative and liberal and independent members of the United States Senate, came up with a compromise that would have added those Border Patrol agents. If Republicans are serious about it, I hear that they might be bringing that bill back.
We're going to get there.
They should vote for it.
If Biden was serious about it, he would be considering executive action, which he's doing behind the scenes now that Republicans have pressured him with the tools used by Donald Trump, which were called inhumane and absolutely outrageous.
I want to get your opinion, but can you explain to our audience, Scott, how the legal system essentially says, no jurisdiction, go on your merry way?
Well, the Supreme Court and other federal circuits have said that this is solely a federal issue. Those are state those are state police, essentially.
Texas National Guard,
The Texas National Guard. They don't have the jurisdiction, notwithstanding the law that I think has been stayed to arrest people. They don't have anywhere to put them, and they put them in jail. And many legal scholars have predicted this. Now, they don't have jurisdiction because they're not federalized officers. But if you really look at that, that's chaos, no doubt about it, right? But those individuals trying to come across the border, one, have their hands up, and two, the Texas State Guard, yes, they do. Hold on, go to the video. These Texas Guards weren't. You can't hear the video, but it doesn't look like they're trying to stop them. Because
it was like 200 against.
Well, of
it
course,
looks like they're stuck. Are we looking at the same video?
They're moving the fences, and then they run through and they get to another wall and they have their hands up.
But
I'm not justifying the chaos.
Just
supportive of they were not violent.
I'll support Scott's legal perspective for a second, because there was an issue where there's no probable cause identified. Like, there's some legal complications here. And Chris happens to be right, too, that there are legislative paths to compromise that neither party seems to be capable of. The problem is that the optics are just so bad, and people are not consuming this issue in a way where they're thinking about what's happening legislatively and legally. They're looking at the pictures and thinking, this makes me feel unsafe and my family.
I promise you, we are going to get to more of the border in the show. Right. Senator Roger Marshall joining us later. I want to talk to you about Tom Suozzi, your old boss, too, by the way, and what he said today. But also be sure to tune in tonight for a special edition of Dan Abrams Live, NewsNation, live with border authorities as they patrol in real time, plus conversations with police departments across the country examining the border crisis. That is tonight, 9 o'clock Eastern, right here on NewsNation. All right. President Biden, last night, the economy, said this. Watch.
No president's had the run we've had in terms of creating jobs and bringing down inflation. It was 9% when I came to office. 9%. But look, people have a right to be concerned.
He says it was 9% inflation when he came into office in January 2021. Show the chart where you compare what happened during the 4 years prior to him and then the 3.5 years that we've been living in. It was at 1.4%. It didn't hit 9% until 17 months later. Maybe you want to give the President Biden, the benefit of the doubt and say, maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe it was a slip of the tongue. I don't know. Maybe. Or was he trying to mislead them?
No, I think maybe he was confusing unemployment with inflation, because he was originally talking about jobs, and then he went to talk about inflation. I would have done it too sometimes.
He was trying to convince everybody that they weren't struggling. If he hadn't doubled down on it and tried to tell people that everything was fine. His exact quote was, we've already turned it around. The polling data has been wrong all along about the economy. And so he's clearly trying to gaslight people.
There's a gap between how people feel on these kitchen table issues and what the statistics say. But you got to remember, what Biden's really talking about is inheriting
a mess.
A COVID economy.
He inherited a mess.
And so the growth and the unemployment being down and stock market being up and all these things, those statistics are accurate.
You have to look at all. You have to look at all of this.
Right.
Yes.
In not just a 1 month or a 1 year stretch, because everybody saw what happened with COVID, right? All the job losses that occurred because of everything that happened.
Yeah.
And then Biden came in, and the economy has definitely gone in that direction.
In the good direction.
In a very good direction, a positive direction.
No, it's not. It is not
for job creation for 40 straight months, right? You hear the president talk about that. But to sit there and say that inflation was at 9% when I took over. I
bet you he was thinking about unemployment.
That's all.
That's what I think.
And so here's what the White House says. We asked the White House. A White House official said, quote, the president was making the point that the factors that caused inflation were in place when he took office.
Well, they were. That is a true statement.
So then does Donald Trump get
the credit? Said he confused unemployment with inflation. That would have been the honest answer, because that's what he did. The president, little advice for you, Mr. President, start saying, I inherited a mess. I inherited a mess. Because he actually inherited a mess. Right. The other guy inherited a booming economy that he tanked. So it's time for him to start saying.
He inherited a mess, and then he set it on fire by injecting trillions into the economy that Steve Ratner said not to, Larry Summers said not to. They said this will absolutely cause inflation. It'll bite you in the butt. And that's exactly what happened. He worsened the mess, which Trump also did with his COVID injection to the economy. He is not immune from that criticism. But to act as if he inherited this big mess and he fixed it when groceries are up 20%, gas is up 30%. Part of that is because he shut down the Keystone Pipeline. He has done things policy-wise that Democrats agree have made it worse.
But Blake, here's the real deal. You can't look at the economy in a vacuum or look at one part of the economy and say he burned it on fire. Unemployment was at a sky-high rocket rate. Right. We had a COVID economy where the government had to pump money into all aspects of the economy.
Nobody knew how to handle it, so they pumped money.
And now it's low because nobody was driving. Nobody was using.
You have 3% unemployment, right, which actually works against lowering inflation.
Right.
It actually does. And so with all the money in the economy, the demand demand is up, and so now you've got a stubborn inflation rate.
Here's the thing. He's still trying to figure out an economic message in May.
But
and I wonder, I wonder if we're going to hear that out of him again. And if you're still trying to figure out your economic...
I feel your pain.
I don't know if
that's the message.
So, okay. So speaking of messages...
Stop talking about
that is the message. Call me, Joe.
Last
got
night,
my number.
here on this show, I sat here, if you were watching, let's talk about the other guy, Donald Trump. And you were here. Were you here yesterday?
Yes, I was.
Okay. So.
No, I wasn't.
You're here like every other day, so I never know. We love Scott. So Donald Trump was not in court, and he wasn't campaigning.
No.
Yeah.
And I sat here and I said, what is Donald Trump doing? Because all I hear from him is, if I'm in court, I can't campaign. And we knew at the time that he was meeting with folks down at Mar-a-Lago who had bought his NFTs. Mm-hmm. And then this video right here went viral. Watch.
A lot of the smartest people in crypto are moving their businesses out of the U.S. because they're scared of the U.S.'s regulations.
Because of the hostility.
Correct.
Yeah, crypto is moving out of the U.S. because of hostility toward crypto.
Correct. So what are you going to do to stop it?
Well, we'll stop it because I don't want that. I don't want that. I want that. If we're going to embrace it, we have to let them be here.
So he embraced crypto last night, which, as Coinbase points out, you got some 50 million Americans in this country. I saw, I think, a lot of 20 and 30-year-olds in that video. Yeah. What about Donald Trump last night making this pivot, or not this pivot, but this whole embrace of crypto as Joe Biden struggles with the youth vote?
Well, it's smart because he's not in office and he doesn't have to deal with the regulation questions, which are the really, really big problems. Exactly. And so you may as well embrace it and take the donations and liquidate it. I don't know what you do with crypto. It's fungible.
He also said he would take campaign donations in crypto.
Well, that's what I was saying.
I've never seen him turn down money in any form.
Take anything.
But I will say that what I learned today was that 1 in 5 voters own crypto, and 1/3 of the voters in both the Hispanic and African American community are crypto traders. And so most of that skews non-white and younger. And so when you're going after trying to paint Biden as out of touch and doesn't understand tech, and you go after the thing that all these young voters are for, you win.
You know, when I think of young voters, I think of banking. It's the first thing I think of when I think of young voters. I'm sorry. It's a joke.
Okay. Well,
I was going to ask Dr. Wright to comment.
That's what I'm saying. I wonder if that was better than any campaign event he could have done.
Well, wait.
Brilliant.
Do you really think the guy in the goggles right there, who's asking him a question when he needs to be in when Trump needs to be in one of the swing states, is going to vote for, and all of the kids' colleagues, simply because they own Bitcoin, are going to vote for Donald Trump because he comes out and makes that statement?
I disagree. I think that community of some 50 million feel that
on that one issue.
Crypto is a coastal thing. He needs to win Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
We need to rethink.
I'm sorry, it is not an issue there. It will not be.
They care about it. It's people's money. They still care about it.
Yeah, they want it well regulated.
But they don't have all their money.
Trump is also dealing with something else, and that is Stormy Daniels. She took the stand again in the New York trial today. Her testimony is now complete. And with that, Trump's defense team asked the judge to end his gag order so he could speak out about her. That request got denied. But it seems as if the Trump team has somewhat found a way to circumvent the gag order. Today, Senator Rick Scott showed up at court and got personal.
The judge's daughter is a political operative and raises money for Democrats. You've got the lead prosecutor's wife is a significant donor to Democrats, and I think to Biden. So this is just a bunch of Democrats saying, we want to make sure that Donald Trump can't talk.
Come on in, Jesse Weber, NewsNation legal contributor. Jesse, great to see you as always. I guess this is sort of a work around the gag order, right?
Yeah, have people speak on your behalf. It works. I got to tell you, I think none of it matters. Why do I say that? You know, Donald Trump's team spent so much time focusing on cross-examining Stormy Daniels today. I think it was a waste. Trying to say she's not credible, trying to say she has a bias to sell a story against him. None of that matters for the case at hand. You know what the most relevant piece of cross-examination was today in this trial about business records? The fact that she didn't know anything about the payments. The fact that she has no idea what this trial is about. She doesn't understand the charges. She hasn't been a part of the business records in them of themselves. I think there's a strong argument to say that they wasted a lot of time questioning her, and that might have actually brought up bad will for the jury and might have seen it as a way of beating her up when it wasn't needed. related. I actually think the witnesses who testified after her, the bookkeeper, the former aide to Donald Trump, talking about him signing checks and how checks would come to the White House was more relevant to the case at hand than Stormy Daniels.
All right, what about this gag order, Jesse? The Trump team wanted Donald Trump to be able to talk about Stormy Daniels. Now that she's no longer on the stand, the judge denied that, right? Call in your mind?
Look, the judge has a sensitive issue because he doesn't want people to attack the witnesses. There is a possibility that Stormy Daniels could come back as a witness, but also remember, we're still waiting for Michael Cohen to testify, the key witness. I don't think the judge wants to be in a position where they're going to say, okay, I'm going to allow Trump to start attacking witnesses after they testify when we're in the middle of this criminal trial.
All right, Jesse Weber, NewsNation legal contributor. Jesse, talk to you again soon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Still to come here on the Hill over the next 45 minutes. 3 big interviews. One on the border, another on the Middle East, and then a third, your airline miles. Senator Roger Marshall, the Homeland Security member, joins us in about 15 minutes' time. Plus, we are live with the points guy, as top officials here in Washington today got together to discuss your precious frequent flyer miles, what they want, and what the points guy thinks you should know. But first, on the other side of the break, one of the top members on the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Adam Smith, joins us live. He spoke with the Secretary of State last night as the president makes a major move on Israel. What did they talk about? And does he agree with what the president just did? We ask him when The Hill on NewsNation returns. Welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. President Biden's threats against Israel now going to a new level.
I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem.
Now, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responding today saying, in part, quote, if we need to stand alone, we will stand alone. And back here at home, the Democratic congressman, for example, Jared Golden, writing, quote, the president's actions signal weakness to Hamas, to our allies and adversaries abroad and at home. Joining us now is the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Adam Smith. Congressman, I thank you for coming back here on the Hill. I appreciate your time, and it is always great to talk to you, sir. You know some of the divisiveness around this, whether it's on the left or on the right. You just heard from the Israeli Prime Minister there. I wonder where you stand on this, sir, and what you made of the president's comments last evening.
Well, I think they lacked clarity, and what the president said there is not really the administration's position. I mean, he gave the distinct impression that if Israel goes into Rafah in any way, we will cut them off entirely. And I have spoken with John Kirby, the spokesperson for the National Security Council, Steve Ricchetti, a senior advisor to the president, as well as several other people last night and today. That's not actually the position of the administration. The position is that if Israel goes into Rafah with an aggressive bombing campaign, then we will restrict the sale of those types of weapons. He's not meant to say that if they go into Rafah at all. In fact, Israel's already in Rafah, as we know. So my main criticism of the administration and president right now is they just haven't been clear on what their policy is. It is not the policy of the Biden administration that they're going to cut off Israel entirely if they go into Rafah.
So why the differences? Look, you're the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, right? You get to speak to folks that most everyone else doesn't get to talk to. But so it's interesting you relaying that to us, and I appreciate it. But it's obviously what you're saying is different from what the president said last night. So I wonder why then did the president say that?
Yeah, no, I am frustrated by that as well. Look, I mean, the short answer to that question is the president thought he was expressing one thing, and he said it in a way that didn't make that clear. Look, we're human beings. We express thoughts. They don't always come out in the detail that we would like them to. During the course of this interview, I'm sure I'll say something that after it's done, I'll go, ooh, gosh, I didn't really make that clear. But this is a huge problem. And I think that the White House needs to clean it up and reiterate our support for Israel, because I agree with my colleague Jared Golden, good friend of mine, with his comment. Right now, the main group holding up a ceasefire is Hamas. We've had a ceasefire on the table for 3 months. Hamas refuses to agree to it because they insist on Israel basically unilaterally surrendering, and Hamas won't even promise to return the hostages if they do. There is a ceasefire on the table. If Hamas returns the hostages, Israel will agree to roughly a 2-month, 8-week ceasefire. And Hamas has been blocking that. I think we need to get that message out. To the extent it looks like we are separating from Israel, that just gives Hamas all the more incentive to keep fighting.
I want to get your reaction to Donald Trump, Congressman. Here was Donald Trump, and I'll get your reaction on the other side.
What Biden is doing with respect to Israel is disgraceful. I guess he feels good about it because he did it as a political decision. You have to do the right decision, not the political decision. But he did a very bad thing.
I hear you, Congressman, on what you said about the messaging and maybe how some of that needs to get cleaned up. But what would you say to the former president who described this as politically driven, essentially?
Well, here's the part. It is not political because there is a very legitimate concern about the way Israel is conducting the war in Gaza. They have not done enough to let humanitarian assistance in. That's been the case for months now. Now, it's gotten better in the last 4 to 6 weeks. But early on, I think Israel made a huge mistake by signaling to the world that they didn't care about humanitarian assistance. They've made a huge mistake by being slow in allowing that humanitarian assistance in to Gaza. And I think they've also been not as careful as they should have been in protecting the civilian population in their campaign in Gaza right now. And I think it's perfectly appropriate for the president to urge them to change that, because if they don't, it undermines Israel's security. But that's different than saying that we're going to cut them off. So I think he needs to clarify that. But there's every reason to be critical of what Israel has done on certain aspects of the campaign.
Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to jump you there, but we appreciate your time as always, and we hope you come on back, Congressman Adam Smith. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks for giving me the chance.
Yep, of course. It's one of the reasons why I love talking to him. It's straightforward, serious lawmaker, top Democrat on one of the most important committees. What do you make, though, of what he said, though, that there was sort of different messages?
I don't think it was straightforward, actually. No. With all due respect to the congressman, everyone critiques Israel. They say they're doing not enough of this, not enough of that. Nobody has a policy alternative. The terrorists are in Rafah hiding among civilians to maximize the body count and starve the population. What would he do instead?
I was referencing the first part of his interview where he basically says, look, I spoke to the White House and I heard something.
Where he said that it was a mix-up and we all make them.
I mean, that's the common. We talked about that earlier today. Good old Chris is standing up for the president. Here's the bottom line. What you said is 100% true, and that's the thing we all have to remember. And also what the congressman said is true, and then he actually did what he said we shouldn't be doing, which is basically fighting both sides of this PR war. First, he says any show of daylight between us and Israel strengthens Hamas, and then he goes after Israel on certain parts of their offense. I don't understand why we are insisting on putting the blame on Israel when they were the ones that were attacked. Their civilians were brutally raped and are still being held and murdered. And then we say that Hamas isn't using human shields, like children and women as human shields, when we know that's true.
What would you say? Both of you. I want to get both of you in here real quick.
Look, I mean, this is a very complicated thing.
It's
right?
not.
There is a big problem here. Israel was attacked. They have every right to defend themselves. And I don't like the fact that around this world, when Jews are defending themselves, it's always a problem. And I have a big problem with that. I have a big problem with the president putting daylight between us and Israel. Big problem. That said, we don't want to see people dying in the tens of thousands by our bombs, right? That is a problem for us as a democracy. And Israel is also a democracy, and they should be taking consideration of civilians a little bit more than they are.
You can't drop 2,000-pound bombs in a heavily populated situation going after Hamas, even if you have a right to go after Hamas. These are humanitarian issues. It is a complex issue, but you can't have it both ways.
It is daylight, though.
A little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
glaring daylight.
And once you crack a little daylight, you got to wonder how much wider that gets.
Look, I've been saying for a long time, I don't like the way they're prosecuting the war. I don't think the motivation's right either for the leader of Israel.
Still much more ahead here on the Hill. Thought you had a good idea of what's happening along the southern border?
The biggest thing is that we do not control the border. The cartel controls the border.
That is part of tonight's NewsNation Border Special. The Homeland Security Committee member, Senator Roger Marshall, joins us on the other side of the break. Stay with us. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation. As there is a question tonight in Washington regarding the southern border, are we about to see round two? Axios reporting that, quote, the Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is planning on reviving the failed bipartisan border deal. Now, that legislation was killed when former President Trump announced his opposition to it and rallied Republicans against it. It would have granted the Biden administration emergency powers to shut down the border at a certain point in time, strengthen asylum requirements, and make some asylum seekers eligible for automatic work authorizations. Joining us now, Kansas Republican Senator Roger Marshall, who sits on the Senate Homeland Security Committee. Senator, thank you for being with us here on the Hill. Appreciate it. Senator, the last time that this bill was there, it was wrapped up with all this foreign aid money. Now the foreign aid money is out the door. So why not take up the border package like Chuck Schumer is seemingly going to try to do?
Well, we'd love to take it on seriously. Look, I think everyone understands that this open southern border is the #1 defining issue for this coming election season. And Joe Biden's poll numbers are so low. Senate Democrats in purple states are up for re-election. Their numbers are so low, they want to give this issue some lip service. But we need a real legislation that has significant policy changes that go back to remain in Mexico. That's what we need to beef up. Actually, what we had before us was a bill that made it work. If we go back to remain in Mexico, that would probably take care of about 75 to 80% of those 11 million people that are crossing the border illegally. So if the Democrats are serious, bring it on. But they're not serious. They're not serious at all. Joe Biden wants these illegal people coming across the country, into our country, to vote Democrat.
So we do or don't need legislation? Because I've heard from Republicans that we do need it and then we don't need it. But now I just heard from you that we do need it so long as it involves remain in Mexico. What is it? We need legislation or don't?
What we need is a new president, a president that's going to enforce the current laws. Yes, there are things we could do to make it easier for President Trump when he's reelected again. But what we know is that Joe Biden's going to ignore the law and do what he darn well wants to. He continues to ignore the law. He has the ability to go back to remain in Mexico right now. But yeah, we'd be happy to square it up and to make it all even more lawful as well. But Joe Biden, make no mistake about it, Joe Biden has the power to go back to remain in Mexico. And the only thing that's going to fix this is a new president in D.C.
Mm-hmm. Senator, our News Nation special on the border is live here tonight, 9 o'clock Eastern, here on News Nation. By the way, I want you to listen to part of it. I know you're not going to be able to see it, but the person that you're about to listen to, their identity has been concealed. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
What do you believe is one of the things that everyday, ordinary Americans don't understand about the southern border?
The biggest thing is that we do not control the border. The cartel controls the border. Everything that we do is a reaction to things that they have planned. Usually we're chasing around pawns while the kings and queens are doing whatever they want.
I hear you talk a lot about the president, Senator, and I get it, but I wonder what you think the most misunderstood aspect of the southern border is that everyday folks all over this country might not know about.
Yeah, I've been there 3 times myself. The Border Patrol officers doing everything they can, but they're simply overwhelmed. If there's more than 1,000 people crossing the border in one day, then the Border Patrol is maxed out. When you have 10,000 a day, it's impossible. There's been over 2 million known gotaways, so that the Border Patrol is so busy being a social worker, being a nurse, being a restaurateur, that they can't go catch the bad guys. And that's why 300 Americans are dying every day from fentanyl poisoning. Not only is the cartel controlling the border, they're controlling the freeways of Kansas. Them and the Chinese triad are controlling the freeways of Kansas and promote this fentanyl trafficking and the human trafficking, that they're a very sophisticated crime family.
Senator Roger Marshall, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you, sir. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Blake.
Yep. What'd you hear there?
He wants a new president, but he doesn't want to pass this legislation because he doesn't think it goes far enough. And the reality is we don't necessarily need a new president. What we need is legislation passed and money to be put behind strengthening the border.
Very simple. He said we need more border agents. There were a lot more border agents in that bill. A lot of money for things that he was just talking about. And then he lied about where fentanyl comes in, lied about the cartels controlling the highways of Kansas.
Chinese triangle.
Yeah, okay. Like, I don't know what planet. I live on Earth. I know. Fentanyl is a massive issue. It's not coming across the border like that. It's coming in at the port of Los Angeles. Exactly. It's coming in at the port of Miami. It's coming in from all over the world.
It's still coming across.
I live on planet Earth. He's saying cartels are controlling the highways in Kansas. I find
Lauren
that
and I are from San Diego, so we know something about the border, and I was endorsed by the National Border Patrol Union when I ran for Congress, so I spent a lot of time on the border. And I will tell you that in President Biden's first year in office, he took 300 executive actions, 89 of which he bragged undid all the things that President Trump did to secure our border. So this November, we all have a choice. Do we want to see more of what we saw at the beginning of this show, which is the rushing masses, breaking laws, or do we want to have a president that will actually do what he's supposed to do, which is to enforce the law?
I saw you look at me when I asked him, so do you want laws or not? Because I've heard it both ways from Republicans.
Yes, it's a great question, and he didn't really answer it. And, you know, as critical as I have been on Biden about the border, there is a universe in which Republicans are not in control. Now this news story is made worse by the fact that they haven't worked with Democrats on this very serious issue. And in public policy making, you get nothing or you get not perfection. So you should use not perfection when it's a serious issue.
He's a senator. Yeah. His job is to pass laws. Right? He doesn't have any other job.
The buck stops with the president.
He didn't do his job.
All right. And by the way, that border special, 9 o'clock Eastern here on NewsNation later this evening. Coming up, though, before then, here on the Hill, top officials here in Washington today. You know what they were meeting about? Your frequent flyer miles. Why were they talking about your miles? Why were they talking about your points? There is one person who knows this issue better than anyone else. He's Brian Kelly. You know him as the points guy, and he joins us live on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
Tonight on NewsNation. Crisis on the border.
From the air and on the ground, ride with Border Patrol live and see what our law enforcement are truly battling.
A must-see primetime event tonight at 9/8 Central, only on NewsNation.
Should the government get involved with them? Well, today, here in Washington, top executives and consumer advocates held a forum on the transparency of credit card rewards programs. The Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg, co-moderated that hearing.
For many Americans, point balances are significant enough that they amount to part of our savings. Today is about examining the fairness, transparency, and predictability of a system that is more and more economically important both to consumers and to businesses like airlines.
Brian Kelly, one of my favorite guests on this show. He is the points guy. He knows all things credit cards. Brian, great to see you again. Thanks for being back with us. So we obviously thought of you when we saw this happening here in Washington today. I wonder what you made of it, because the Transportation Secretary was there, the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was there, but none of the airline folks were there. None of the major credit card companies were there. So tell us what they talked about and where you think this is headed.
Well, I'll tell you why they weren't there, because so on face value, let me just say, I kind of agree with a lot of the things they discussed today. You know, the airlines make so much money off these programs. They often devalue miles, right? Charge more and more and more. Some major U.S. airlines even still have expiration policies. So I'm all for pro-consumer rules that would make it better for consumers to use their points. But the reason why this is sort of a sham, in my opinion, is that this meeting was called for by Senator Durbin and Marshall, who was just on the show, who are trying to ram through legislation that would dramatically change the landscape of points and credit cards in America, and it would make it way hard for consumers to earn points. So the real reason behind this hearing and why none of the important players were there is because it wasn't about consumers. It was about this legislation that would greatly benefit retailers.
So what does this mean for my miles? Well, let's just get right to it. What does it mean for my miles? What does it mean for my points? And what's going on?
The credit card, so the Credit Card Competition Act, which they're trying to ram through, they're trying to attach it to every single piece of legislation. Simply put, if you've got a points earning credit card today, this legislation would force you to get essentially a debit network on your card, and every single time you went to use your credit card, if the CCCA passed, the retailer would get to choose whether you got points or not. So think about that. Every time you went out to a restaurant, you would have to argue tooth and nail to have it run on the Visa network of your choice. So Senator Durbin, who killed debit rewards 10 years ago, he's trying to use this hearing to build a narrative that America needs this legislation because these airlines are out of control.
Let me push back on you here because we don't have Senator Durbin, but as I told this to I say this all the time when we talk about this, airlines are banks first and airlines second. The credit card rewards programs are more valuable than the airlines themselves. When I think their market cap of the major airlines is something around like $60 billion, and the market cap of the value of the rewards programs, there you go, $72 billion. So if these things, Scott just said, wow, if these things are more valuable than the airlines themselves, don't you need a little? I mean, Pete Buttigieg was talking about fairness and transparency.
Yeah, and I fully agree. So if this hearing were actually about that, I do believe there needs to be more consumer protections. I don't think airlines should expire your miles. Can a bank take away your cash? I do believe there are positive things that should be done. United Airlines just started allowing their members to transfer points between friends and family for free. I think that should be more encouraged. And also the airlines, whenever you want to buy a fare, you can go to an online travel agency and compare and contrast. With loyalty points, every airline makes you go to their website, and often they won't even show you all the options with their partners. So I do think the airlines, look, the pressure's going up in the kitchen. I think the airlines need to have a wake-up call and throw some more bones to consumers. For sure.
Brian, I got to run, but I'm sure everyone's screaming at me and asking me and saying, Blake, ask him the question. What's the credit card right now? If you had one, what are you getting?
Yeah, which one? Ooh, that's a great one. I would say the Bilt rewards card, you get free points on rent.
Okay, there you go. Short and concise. I told you he's one of my favorite guests.
Yeah,
love him having here on the show.
Big fan.
Kelly, the points guy. Thank you, sir. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
You know what? One of the fascinating things, Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief of The Hill, when we talked about this issue, said this is that Durbin bill that he's talking about, one of the most for lobbyists, issues. One of the biggest lobby issues, and the volume gets turned up so loud on this issue here in Washington.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. Everybody has one of these, right? I literally just broke down this week and got my first points credit card. I like to pay cash for first. Yeah, my first one. And I'm regretting not hearing him say that one.
I'd like to know more about the airline.
He's really great. I follow him religiously.
Not on the credit card piece, but like if you've got 1 million miles, for example, right? They have various levels of service, and they don't promote that or they don't advertise that at all. Sometimes you're just or Delta miles, if you will. You don't even know what your benefits are.
I just love that you went to the million.
I know.
You got to figure it out.
Fancy pants.
We all saw up in the air.
Just be quiet.
All right. We didn't know it was about you, Scott.
Those of you in the listening audience who travel a lot, you understand the million mile club. Forgive me, I'm sorry.
Okay, George Clooney.
What else
we got Barron Trump. I actually want to get to this. Barron Trump. He's set to make his political debut. The former President Donald Trump's youngest son. He's 18 years old. He is graduating high school, but he is also going to be a Florida delegate for the Republican National Convention coming up this July in Milwaukee. NewsNation has obtained a list of the Trump delegates. It also includes, by the way, Don Jr., Eric, Tiffany. Ivanka is one of the 5 children currently not on the list. Neither is Jared Kushner, by the way. But Barron Trump, 18 years old. Look, obviously, the children of presidents, off limits. Right? Everyone agrees with that. Barron Trump, though, is now 18. This summer, he is going to be going into college, and he's now entering the political world, signing up to be a delegate.
It would be so stupid of Democrats to do anything to attack
to talk about
Trump.
him.
That's the trap.
Off limits.
They won't need
Listen to me, Democrats. He is off limits.
By the way, I'm not suggesting he should be on limits per se, or like you should attack Barron Trump, but my point is he's now an adult going into like the real world as he graduates college, and he's clearly making the decision that he wants to be a delegate.
Delegates to the convention are not necessarily political figures. They're people who are activists in the party. He's going to be a delegate at the convention so he can support his dad.
So let me ask you.
What are you going to do?
Let me ask you this: what do you make of no Ivanka and no Jared? on that.
Isn't she itching to get back in the game? I think I've
Is
just
she?
been
I don't know. I don't think that's
I've literally been reading about it as of late.
Too. They've kind of walked away from that. When you get $50 billion from the Saudi government, you do a lot with it. How much
2.5.
How much was it?
2.5.
You know what's sad?
Here's the thing about Ivanka. She had a great life before this. She had a great life in New York. She does not have as great a life anymore.
Still pretty good.
And it's better than mine, but it's not as great as it used to be.
Right.
She ain't going to all the great restaurants. She's not walking in and people,
But I think serving a president in the White House is an honor.
That's what I was trying to say.
I think it's an honor. Public service is an honor. I think that we all make trade-offs when we go to the White House, and that's something we know when we go in. And so if you don't believe that, you shouldn't be in the White House. But if you're a public servant and you have that mindset, you'll put aside your personal comfort to do what's best for your country.
Is it public service when you're serving your dad?
The family members, and I've done research on this, the family members of presidents are more valuable when they stay as far away as possible, because that's when they're apolitical. So there you go.
Leland Vitter, host of On Balance. Other side of the break, your dog and the CDC. There's a connection. Leland and I talk about it coming up.
Don't mess with it.
So before we say goodbye, a story about man's best friend caught our eye. The CDC this week issued new guidelines for how dogs are now allowed to be brought into the country. Starting on August 1st, all dogs coming into the U.S. must look healthy upon arrival, be at least 6 months old, and be microchipped. It's an effort to prevent the spread of rabies, the CDC says. As for cats, the agency says no changes were made because they are not known to carry the disease. Host of On Balance, Leland Vitter, joins me live. Are they...
Bird flu is going around, and this is what the CDC is spending their time on?
That's what I said. I'm like, did someone just have to write a press release? Is that what went on here?
So before this, if you brought a really unhealthy-looking dog into the United States, it was okay?
Like, you know if a dog's unhealthy, right? That means it's like last few weeks. Yeah. But how do you determine an unhealthy dog? Like, I guess, is that it?
I don't know. It just seems like if you're going to have rules like a negative rabies test, there were things you could do if you were really worried about this.
Show Dutch.
There we go.
This gives us an excuse to show Dutch, Leland's dog. This is probably going to be the highlight.
There he is, buddy.
Day. There you go. There's Dutch, Leland's man's best friend, Leland's best friend, and show Cece love. There's Cece BC, my little girl, somewhere. Pop her up. Nope, we don't have her. That's okay. Yeah. Cece will make her debut. There she is. There we go.
She looks a lot happier. Dutch is looking at the camera going, okay, I want to be with Mom right now.
You got Scott Walker coming up on the show?
Scott Walker's on the show.